My secret double life is a confession I can never make, and it starts with the man sitting across from me, my husband. It's a wasteland, Seraphina. A few rundown buildings. We're doing the city a favor. Donald's voice was smooth, like a stone polished by the sea. He tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the glossy map spread across our dining table. The table was long enough to seat 20, but it was always just the two of us. I stared at the red square he was pointing to. A block of the city erased. He saw a wasteland. I saw a garden. What's there now? I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. It was a skill I had perfected, like learning a new language. The language of being Mrs. Vancroft. He waved a hand, dismissing the question. Nothing of importance. Old warehouses, a clinic that should have been condemned years ago. It's an investment in the future. His eyes, the color of a pale winter sky, met mine. They weren't cold, not exactly. They were just empty. He was looking at me, but he was seeing one of his assets. His beautiful wife, the perfect accessory to his perfect life. The Vancroft name will be on a building that touches the clouds, he continued, a rare spark of passion in his voice. It was the only time I ever saw it. When he talked about buildings, about legacy, about concrete and steel. My hands were clenched in my lap, the silk of my dress cool against my skin. I could feel my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The red square on the map felt like it was burning a hole right through the table, right through me. Because I knew exactly what was in that square. I knew the cracked pavement and the colorful murals painted on brick walls. I knew the sound of laughter that echoed there. It wasn't a wasteland. It was the only place I was real. Of course, Donald, I said. The words tasted like ash. It sounds wonderful. He smiled, satisfied. The conversation was over. He folded the map, the sharp creases hiding the red square from view. Just like that, it was gone. He stood up, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive shirt. I have a call. We're going to the Bailey's Gala tonight. Wear the blue dress. The one with the diamonds. He didn't wait for a reply. He never did. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the large room pressing in on me. This was my life. A series of beautiful, empty rooms and clothes chosen for me like a costume. I was a doll on his shelf. He had saved my family, pulled them from a mountain of debt back in Manila with a single phone call. He gave them security. He gave me a cage. A beautiful, gilded cage where my own soul felt like a stranger. I couldn't breathe. I stood up, my chair scraping softly on the polished floor. I needed to get out. I needed to be Sarah. The walk to my dressing room felt like crossing a desert. In one closet were the clothes of Seraphina Vancroft. Gowns that shimmered, shoes with heels like needles, purses too small to hold anything of substance. But I walked past it to a simple wooden wardrobe tucked in the back. Inside were my real clothes. Worn jeans, soft t-shirts, a pair of paint-splattered sneakers. I changed quickly, my movements urgent. With each layer I shed, I felt myself coming back. I pulled my long, dark hair into a messy bun, and for the first time that day, the face looking back at me in the mirror felt like my own. My golden brown skin looked warmer, my eyes less haunted. I was no longer a ghost. I slipped out the service entrance, a route I knew by heart. The doorman, Michael, gave me a small, knowing nod. He was the only one who saw me come and go like this. He never said a word. The air that hit my face was thick and alive, filled with the sounds of the city sirens, music, people shouting. It was a mess, and it was freedom. I didn't take one of the black cars waiting for Donald. I took the subway. Down in the rumbling dark, surrounded by strangers, I was anonymous. I was just a girl on her way somewhere. I was Sarah. Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description. The Arts Center was exactly where Donald's red square was on the map. It was an old brick building someone had tried to save with a coat of bright yellow paint. From the outside, it looked like it was barely standing. But inside, it was the most alive place in the world. The moment I walked through the door, The smell of paint and clay and sweaty kids hit me. It smelled like home. A young girl with bright pink braids, Maya, ran up and hugged my legs. Sarah, you're here. I finished my dragon. I crouched down, a real smile spreading across my face. Let me see this dragon. She dragged me over to a table where a lopsided clay dragon sat, its wings painted a fierce purple. It was beautiful. All around me, kids were painting, drawing, molding clay. They were creating worlds. This was the place I had built from the shadows, funneling money from a secret account Donald knew nothing about. It was a place for kids who had nothing, a place to show them they could make something amazing out of what the world saw as junk. It's a masterpiece, Maya, I whispered, and she beamed. Needs more fire, though, a voice with a warm, Irish lilt said from behind me. I stood up and turned. Collins O'Connell leaned against a paint-chipped pillar, a playful grin on his face. His hair was the color of fire, and his pale skin was dusted with freckles. He had a notebook in one hand and a pen tucked behind his ear. He was a playwright, a storyteller who had stumbled into our center a few months ago and refused to leave. All your stories need more fire, Collins, I teased. And what's a story without fire? He shot back, his eyes sparkling. It's just a list of things that happened. Fire is the important part. He looked past me, at the kids, and his expression softened. You've done a good thing here, Sarah. A really good thing. My chest felt tight. He saw me. He saw what I did, not what I wore or who I was married to. He only knew me as Sarah, a volunteer who loved art. He didn't know I was the one who paid the rent and bought the supplies. He didn't know I was living a lie. We all did it together, I said, which was true. The community kept this place running. Maybe, he said, stepping closer. But you're the heart of it. He smelled like coffee and ink. Speaking of fire, I was hoping you'd read the new scene I wrote for my play. It's the big fight. The part where the little guys finally stand up to the big, bad corporation. The words sent a chill down my spine. The corporation? Yeah. The faceless giant trying to tear down their neighborhood to build some shiny new tower for rich folks, he said, his passion rising. But they fight back. They protest, they make noise, they show the world that you can't just erase people. He paused, his gaze intense. I heard a rumor today, actually. A nasty one. That the company trying to buy up this area is so aggressive, they've hired some fixer to scare off anyone who resists. A real piece of work, apparently. Probably just talk, but it gets you thinking, you know. I thought of Donald's cool, dismissive voice. We're doing the city a favor. I thought of the name of the demolition company he'd mentioned in passing, a name known for getting things done, no matter the cost. My blood ran cold. Before I could say anything, the front door burst open. It was Leo, a teenager who helped me with the older kids. He was breathing hard, his face pale. He was holding a piece of paper. Sarah, he panted, holding it out. It was tacked to the door. To all the doors on the block. I took the paper from his trembling hand. The kids went quiet, sensing the change in the air. My eyes scanned the official-looking text. It was full of legal words I didn't understand, but I saw the important ones. Demolition. Eviction. 30 days. And at the bottom, printed in bold, unforgiving letters, was the name of the developer. The name of the faceless giant. Vancroft Enterprises. The paper slipped from my fingers. 30 days. Donald was giving me 30 days to watch my world burn. The ticking of the clock in my head was so loud I thought I would go deaf. Collins picked up the notice, his jaw tightening as he read it. The playful light in his eyes was gone, replaced by a hard, determined glint. He crumpled the paper in his fist. No, he said, his voice low and dangerous. No, they don't get to do this. They don't get to just wipe us off the map. He turned to me, his eyes blazing with a warrior's fire. He took my hands, his grip firm and reassuring, though he had no idea of the earthquake tearing through me. We're going to fight these monsters, Sarah, he declared, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. We're going to show them what a real wasteland looks like when we're done with them. We're going to take down this Donald Vancroft, whoever he is. His words hung in the air, a promise and a threat all at once. Take down this Donald Vancroft. My husband. The man whose name was on my bank cards, my passport, my entire life. My hand went cold in Collins's grip, but I couldn't pull away. The kids were watching us, their eyes wide and scared. Maya clutched her clay dragon to her chest like a shield. They were looking at me, at Collins, waiting for us to save them. How could I tell them the monster we were fighting was the one who paid for the roof over my head? We will, I finally managed to whisper, the lie sticking to my tongue. We'll fight. The lie seemed to give everyone hope. It rippled through the room, turning fear into something harder, something defiant. Collins squeezed my hand, his belief in me a heavy weight. That's the spirit, Sarah. We'll call a community meeting for tomorrow night. Spread the word. We need everyone here. We need a plan. I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. He saw my agreement as strength. He had no idea it was the first step off a cliff. That night, back in the silent, sprawling house, I had to play my part. I wore the blue dress with the diamonds. At the gala, I smiled until my face ached. I listened to men like Donald talk about profits and acquisitions, their voices a dull buzz in my ears. At one point, I overheard a man congratulate Donald on his new downtown project. Heard you got it for a steal, the man said, chuckling. Clearing out that old slum. Donald's smile was thin. It's progress. Sometimes progress requires a firm hand. I felt a dizzying wave of nausea and excused myself, walking on trembling legs to the marble bathroom. I gripped the cold sink, staring at my reflection. The diamonds at my throat felt like a chain, choking me. Seraphina in the mirror was a stranger, a perfectly decorated prisoner. The fire I felt as Sarah, standing next to Collins, was gone. Here, I was just smoke. The next evening, the arts center was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces a mixture of anger and fear. Leo had set up a makeshift stage, and Collins stood on it, a magnetic force pulling everyone's attention. I stayed near the back, trying to make myself small, my heart hammering against my ribs with every new person who walked through the door. What if one of them recognized me? What if someone from my other life saw me here? They think we're nothing. Collins's voice boomed, full of righteous anger. They think they can sign a piece of paper and turn our homes, our lives, into dust. They think money gives them that right. A woman near the front shouted, "They're wrong," and the room erupted in agreement. Damn right, they're wrong. Collins pointed into the crowd. This center, my friends, is more than just a building. It's a heart. And we're not going to let some faceless corporation rip it out. He spoke of his own past then, his voice softening slightly but losing none of its power. He told them about his grandfather's bookstore back in a small town in Ireland. How a big developer came in and wanted to build a shopping center. They fought, he said. They held protests, they wrote letters, they stood in front of bulldozers. He was just a boy, watching his grandfather, his hero, fight with everything he had. We lost, Collins said, and the room went silent. They tore it down. I watched them do it. I watched my granda's spirit crumble with that old brick. And I swore to myself then and there, I'd never let that happen again. I'd never let the little guy get crushed without a fight. His story hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought of my own father in Manila, his pride broken by debt, the hope draining from his eyes. Donald had been our developer, our faceless giant. He hadn't torn down a building, he had bought and sold our future, and I was part of the price. Collins was fighting the very thing I had surrendered to. A woman with sharp eyes and a reporter's notebook pushed her way to the front. Evelyn Reed, she said, her voice crisp and professional. I'm an independent journalist. I want to help you tell your story. A human interest piece could get this city on your side. Collins's face lit up. That's brilliant. We need that. We need a voice. Evelyn's eyes scanned the room and landed on me. She gave me a sympathetic smile. We need a face for the movement. Someone the public can connect with. Her gaze lingered, and a shiver of unease went down my spine. After the meeting, as people filed out with a renewed sense of purpose, I stayed behind to help clean up. I was wiping paint off a table when Collins came over, his energy still buzzing. We did it, Sarah. We lit the match, he said, his smile so genuine it hurt. Then his smile faded as he really looked at me. You're shaking. I hadn't even noticed. I put the rag down, my hands trembling. It's just a lot. I know, he said, his voice dropping low. He stood closer, and the noisy room seemed to melt away until it was just the two of us. My story, about my granda. I don't tell that to many people. But I wanted you to know why I fight so hard. I understand, I said, and for the first time, it felt like a truth, not a lie. I understand what it's like to watch someone you love feel helpless. He saw the raw emotion in my face, the guard I usually kept up completely gone. Who was it for you? He asked gently. I couldn't say my family. I couldn't say myself. So I looked at the colorful, chaotic room around us, at Maya's lopsided dragon still sitting on the table. Everyone here, I whispered. I don't want them to feel that way. He nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine. It felt like he could see straight through the lies to the broken parts underneath. He reached out and brushed a stray piece of hair from my cheek, his touch light as a feather, but it sent a shock through my whole body. It was a simple, kind gesture. The kind of touch I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't ownership. It was connection. You're the strongest person I know, Sarah, he said softly. Don't ever forget that. I had to look away before the tears in my eyes could fall. The next few days were a blur of secret meetings, late-night phone calls, and hurried trips on the subway. The fight for the center consumed my life as Sarah. My life as Seraphina became a tightrope walk. Donald grew more irritated by my absences. Another charity luncheon, he asked one afternoon, watching me change out of a simple dress and into my worn jeans. It's for the Children's Literacy Fund, I lied, not looking at him. Lies were becoming my native language. He walked over to the wardrobe where I kept my other life hidden. He pulled out my paint-splattered sneakers, holding them between his thumb and forefinger as if they were contaminated. And you wear these to the luncheon? My blood ran cold. I change when I get there. They're comfortable for the walk. He stared at me for a long moment, his pale eyes unreadable. He didn't believe me. I could see it. But he didn't push. He just dropped the shoes back into the wardrobe. There's been some trouble with the downtown project, he said, changing the subject so abruptly it felt like a warning. Some local agitators. They're organizing protests. My team will handle it. Oh, I said, trying to sound bored, uninterested. It's a minor annoyance, he said, his voice full of steel. But I don't like annoyances, Seraphina. I like things to be smooth. I always get what I want. You should know that better than anyone. He walked out of the room, leaving his threat hanging in the air. He was talking about the building, but it felt like he was talking about me. A week later, the first betrayal came. It came in the form of a news alert on Leo's phone. He held it up during a planning session at the center, his face glowing with excitement. Sarah, you have to see this. Evelyn published the article. Collins crowded around, a huge grin spreading across his face. Let's see it. This is it. This is how we win. My heart pounded with a mix of terror and a tiny, foolish sliver of hope. Maybe Evelyn really had helped us. Leo clicked the link, and an online newspaper page loaded. The headline was big and bold, "The Angel of the Forgotten Block. Who is the mysterious woman leading the fight against a corporate giant?" Underneath the headline was a picture. It was a grainy, candid shot of me from the first community meeting. My face was in profile, my expression passionate and intense as I listened to someone speak. My hair was messy, and I was wearing one of my old, soft t-shirts. I was unmistakably Sarah. I was, to anyone who knew me, unmistakably Seraphina de la Cruz. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't a story about the community. It was a story about me. The article was full of quotes from people praising the quiet, fierce Sarah, the heart of their resistance. Evelyn had twisted everything. She had made me the hero, the mystery, the spectacle. She hadn't helped us, she had put a target on my back. "This is incredible," Collins said, his voice full of awe. He turned to me, his eyes shining. "Look at you, Sarah. She captured you perfectly. You're the face of this fight now. They can't ignore us. When Donald Vancroft sees this, he'll know we're serious." I couldn't breathe. My vision started to swim. Collins thought this was a victory. He was celebrating my death sentence. Donald wouldn't just see this. The whole world would see this. The ruthless gossip columnist he'd mentioned, the one who connected dots, would see this. They would all see this picture of Sarah and wonder why she looked so much like Donald Vancroft's wife. The trust one had placed in Evelyn had been a foolish mistake. And the joy on Collins's face felt like its own kind of betrayal, a terrifying, innocent twisting of the knife. He was pushing me into the light, not knowing that the light was the one thing that would burn me alive. The two halves of my life weren't on a collision course anymore. The crash had already begun. My smile felt like a cheap mask, ready to crack and fall apart. "It's a lot to take in," I stammered, pulling my hand away from Collins's warm grasp. I needed space. I needed air. The walls of the center, my sanctuary, were suddenly closing in, covered with a million copies of my face. Every cheer from the crowd felt like a stone being thrown at me. "It's more than a lot, Sarah, it's everything," Collins said, his voice brimming with a hope that felt like poison. He didn't see the danger. He only saw the victory. He grabbed a broom and started sweeping with renewed energy, as if clearing away the dust would clear the path to saving our home. I had to get out. "I have to go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I have an early morning." His back was to me. "Of course. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. The whole city's going to be talking about us." He turned, his smile bright enough to light the entire room. "About you." I fled. I didn't say goodbye to Maya or Leo. I just ran, pushing through the happy, celebrating crowd and bursting out into the cool night air. The subway ride back was torture. A girl across from me was scrolling on her phone, and I saw it. My picture. The headline. She was reading the article right there. I shrank into my seat, pulling the hood of my simple jacket over my head, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I felt naked, exposed to the world in a way I had never been, not even in the expensive, revealing gowns Donald made me wear. He curated my image, but this was me. The real me. And it was about to destroy everything. When I used my key on the service entrance, my hand was shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the lock to turn. I half expected Donald to be waiting for me right there, holding a printout of the article, his face a mask of cold fury. But the halls were silent. The air was still and sterile, a stark contrast to the vibrant life I had just left behind. I crept through my own home like a thief. I found him in his study. He was sitting in his large leather chair, facing away from the door, looking out at the glittering city lights. A glass of amber liquid sat on the table beside him. The room smelled of old books and power. "You're late," he said without turning around. His voice was calm. Too calm. I froze in the doorway, my escape clothes feeling like a costume of guilt. I lost track of time. The fundraiser went on longer than expected. The lie felt clumsy, pathetic. He finally swiveled his chair to face me. His eyes, those pale, empty skies, scanned me from head to toe. He took in my worn jeans, my cheap sneakers, the frantic pulse I could feel beating in my throat. I braced myself for the explosion, for the accusations. It never came. "There's a pest problem at the new development site," he said, his voice flat. He picked up his glass, swirling the liquid. "Rats. People who don't know their place. They've managed to get some minor press. A foolish little article online." He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving mine. "It features a rather striking woman. She actually looks a great deal like you, Seraphina. A poorer, Messier version, of course. But the resemblance is uncanny." Ice flooded my veins. He knew. He had to know. This was a game. He was a cat, and I was the mouse he was batting around before the final, killing bite. "What a strange coincidence," I managed to say, my voice sounding thin and far away. He set the glass down with a soft click. "I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in assets and liabilities. This woman, this Sarah, is a liability. And liabilities," he said, standing up and walking towards me, "are always dealt with. Swiftly and quietly." He stopped just in front of me, so close I could feel the cold radiating from him. He reached out and tucked a piece of my messy hair behind my ear, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Go and get changed. We have an early breakfast with the investors tomorrow. Wear the cream suit. I need you to look dependable." He walked away, leaving me standing there, shaking and hollowed out. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't accused me. He had done something much worse. He had told me, in his own cold way, that he was going to destroy Sarah. And he wanted me, Seraphina, to sit beside him and watch. The next day, the atmosphere at the center was completely different. The joy from the night before was gone, replaced by a thick, simmering fear. Someone had broken in overnight. They hadn't stolen anything. They had just destroyed. Paint was splashed over the children's murals. Clay projects were smashed on the floor. Maya's purple dragon was in a dozen pieces. And spray-painted in black across the main wall were 2 words, "Get out." Maya was crying silently in a corner, clutching a single broken wing. The other kids were huddled together, their eyes wide. The parents who had been so full of fight last night now looked defeated, whispering about how it wasn't safe. This was Donald's firm hand. This was his quiet, swift message. Collins was a storm of fury. He paced back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. This is how they fight? Like cowards? Like bullies, terrorizing children. He stopped in front of the hateful black words on the wall. This isn't going to scare us. This is going to make us fight harder. But I could see he was wrong. I looked at the faces around me. They were scared. They were people with jobs to lose, families to protect. They couldn't afford to fight a monster who came in the night. Just then, the door opened and Evelyn Reed, the journalist, walked in. She took in the scene with a sharp, calculating gaze. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice filled with a sympathy that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This is awful. But it's also an opportunity." Collins turned on her. "An opportunity? Look at this place. Look at these kids." "I know," she said calmly. "And the whole city needs to look too. They attacked you because your story is getting out there. Because of Sarah." She turned her attention to me. "You have them running scared. We need to press that advantage. I've been talking to a local news station. They want to do an on-camera interview. With you. Tonight." My whole body went rigid. An interview. On television. It was the one thing I couldn't do. It would be a confession signed in bright studio lights. "No," I said, the word coming out choked. "I can't." "Sarah, you have to," Collins pleaded, his anger shifting to desperation. He gestured to the frightened families. "They're losing hope. They need to see that their leader isn't afraid. That we aren't afraid." "I'm not their leader," I whispered, backing away. "Yes, you are," he insisted, stepping towards me. "You're the only one they'll listen to. You're the face of this. Evelyn made you the face of this. It's too late to hide in the background now." I looked at Maya, still crying over her broken dragon. I looked at Leo, trying to scrub the black paint off the wall, his young face set with a grim determination that broke my heart. Donald's warning echoed in my head. Liabilities are always dealt with. He wasn't just talking about a building anymore. He was threatening these people. These children. My secret life had put them all in danger. Hiding now wouldn't protect them. It would only abandon them. There was no going back. Donald had already seen the photo. The game was already in motion. My only choice was what piece I wanted to be. A silent, helpless queen on his board or a pawn that fought back. I took a deep breath, the smell of turpentine and fear filling my lungs. I looked from Collins's desperate, hopeful face to Maya's tear-streaked one. I made a choice. "Okay," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I'll do it. I'll do the interview." Relief washed over Collins's face so intensely it was like watching the sun come out. The nervous murmuring in the room stopped. Everyone was looking at me, their hope rekindled by my one, terrifying word. I had just agreed to jump off a cliff, and they were all cheering. That evening, before we had to leave for the television station, the center was quiet. Most of the families had gone home, promising to watch the news. It was just me and Collins, standing in the middle of the cleaned-up but still wounded room. "I'm scared," I admitted to the floor, unable to meet his eyes. I felt him move closer. "Me too," he said softly. I looked up surprised. His face, usually so full of fire and certainty, was vulnerable. When I saw what they did this morning, for a second, I thought about my granda. I thought, here we go again. The bullies are going to win. He shook his head, a small, sad smile on his lips. But then I saw you. You were terrified, I could see it. But you stood up anyway. You agreed to do this, to put yourself out there, to be the target. For all of us. He reached out, not to touch my face this time, but to take my hand. His fingers laced through mine, his palm warm and steady. You have more courage in your little finger than Vancroft and all his men have in their whole miserable bodies. You're not like them. You're real. My heart ached with the weight of his words, with the beautiful, terrible lie of it all. He thought I was brave. He had no idea I was part of the very world he hated. His belief in me was a precious gift I had done nothing to deserve. I squeezed his hand, a silent, desperate apology. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A number I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted. I pulled my hand from Collins's and answered it. Hello. Don't do it, Seraphina. It was Donald. His voice was different. Not cold or commanding. It was tired. Heavy. How did you get this number? I whispered, turning away from Collins. I have all your numbers, he said, a simple statement of fact. I'm calling to tell you to cancel the interview. Walk away from it. From them. Or what? I challenged, a flicker of Sarah's fire rising in me. You'll send your men to break more children's toys? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, stripped of all its corporate polish. I built this life for you, this perfect, safe world, because I saw what my world does to women who fight. My father, he was a man like me, built an empire. My mother, she had a passion. She funded a clinic in a poor neighborhood he wanted to develop. She organized protests. She became the face of the resistance. His words hung in the air, each one a hammer blow against the reality I thought I knew. He didn't stop her, Donald continued, his voice cracking slightly. He destroyed her. Not with bulldozers. With whispers. He used the press, his connections. He painted her as unstable, as a fool, as an adulteress. He ruined her name until no one would stand with her. He broke her spirit until there was nothing left. I watched him do it. I swore I would never let that happen to you. I put you in a beautiful cage to protect you, Seraphina. Not from me. From them. From what men like me are capable of. The phone felt heavy as a stone in my hand. He wasn't a monster. Or maybe he was, but he was a monster with a reason, a man so broken by his past that his only way to show love was to control, to possess, to lock away. He was trying to stop me from becoming his mother. I am not your mother, I whispered. You're about to be, he said, his voice turning cold again, the moment of vulnerability gone. You step in front of that camera tonight, and you unleash the world I tried to save you from. This is your last chance to choose the cage. It's safe in here. He hung up. I stood there frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. The world had tilted on its axis. Collins was looking at me, his brow furrowed with concern. Sarah? Is everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. I had. The ghost of Donald's mother. The ghost of my future. I was standing on the edge of the cliff, and my husband had just told me exactly how far I would fall. But as I looked at Collins, at the hope in his eyes, at the memory of Maya's broken dragon, I knew it didn't matter. Donald thought he was giving me a choice between a cage and destruction. But he was wrong. It was a choice between his fear and their hope. And I couldn't let fear win. Not anymore. I put the phone in my pocket. I'm fine, I said, my voice steadier than I ever thought possible. Let's go. We have a story to tell. The television studio was colder than any room in Donald's house. The lights were so bright they made my eyes water, bleaching all the color from the world. It was a world of black cables, gray walls, and the intense, focused silence of people waiting for a show to begin. Collins sat in the small, dark audience section just off camera. He gave me a thumbs up, trying to smile, but he looked as out of place as I felt. He belonged in a world of warm wood and splattered paint, not this cold, sterile box. I was a ghost caught between two worlds, about to be exposed by 1,000 tiny light bulbs. Evelyn Reed stood beside me, fixing the collar on my simple blouse. Just be yourself, she said, her voice a low hum of excitement. Your honest, passionate self. That's what people fell in love with. Her eyes had a hungry glint. This wasn't about the center for her. This was about her career. I was her big story. A man with a headset pointed at me, then counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. A red light on the camera blinked on, and suddenly, I was live. Our guest tonight is a woman known only as Sarah, the interviewer began, her smile professionally kind. She's the reluctant leader of a community fighting to save their homes and their local arts center from the path of a new Vancroft Enterprises development. Sarah, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I imagined I was talking to Maya, to Leo, not to a million strangers. The questions came fast. She asked about the center, about the eviction notices, about the vandalism. With every answer, I felt myself stepping deeper into Sarah, a person braver than I ever was. I spoke about the children, about how art gives them a voice when they feel like the world isn't listening. I talked about community, about how home is more than just walls and a roof. This developer, Donald Vancroft, the interviewer said, her tone shifting. He's one of the most powerful men in the city. Are you truly not afraid of him? I thought of Donald's call. I put you in a beautiful cage to protect you. I looked straight into the camera, knowing he was watching. I'm not afraid of one man, I said, my voice ringing with a truth that was both Sarah's and my own. I'm afraid of what he represents. I'm afraid of a world where men in towers can decide that a neighborhood, that people, are worthless because they don't make enough money. I'm afraid of men who think building cages is the same thing as building homes. Collins was leaning forward in his seat, his face glowing with pride. He believed in me. His belief was a fire that burned away my fear. The interviewer leaned in, sensing a moment. You speak with such passion. It's clear this is deeply personal for you, she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. But people want to know, who are you, Sarah? You're the face of this fight, but no one seems to know where you came from. What's your story? The question hung in the air, a trap with silent, snapping jaws. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment the lie would break. I took a breath. I thought of my family in Manila, of the life I left behind, of the girl who loved to paint more than anything. My story, I repeated softly. My story is the same as every person on that block. I'm a person who was told to be quiet, to be small. I come from a place where you learn that your dreams don't matter as much as someone else's plans. I looked past the interviewer, past the camera, and into the darkness where Collins Saturday, my story isn't important. The only thing that matters is that we are here now and we will not be erased. The interviewer was silent for a moment, caught off guard. The floor manager was making frantic signals. My time was up. As the show cut to a commercial, the studio erupted in motion. Evelyn was beaming, clapping me on the shoulder. Collins rushed over, his eyes shining. Sarah, that was. I have no words, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled me into a hug, his arms wrapping around me tightly. For a second, I let myself lean into him, to feel the solid warmth of his body against mine. It felt safe. It felt real. You were perfect, he whispered into my hair. You gave them a voice. You gave everyone hope. We walked out of the studio and into the main lobby, a feeling of victory buzzing in the air. We had done it. We had told our story to the world. A group of studio interns were clustered around a large television screen on the wall, watching the news. As we passed, the words "breaking news" flashed across the screen in bright red. Just moments ago, a news anchor said, her face serious, Vancroft Enterprises released a stunning statement in response to the growing controversy around their downtown development. My blood ran cold. Collins and I stopped, our eyes glued to the screen. Donald's corporate logo filled the frame. Vancroft Enterprises has announced the formation of a new charitable arm, the Vancroft Foundation for Urban Arts, the anchor continued. The Foundation's first initiative is a promise to build a new, multi-million-dollar, state-of-the-art community arts facility for the very neighborhood they planned to develop. My breath caught in my throat. Collins stared, his face a mask of confusion. Furthermore, the anchor read, Vancroft Enterprises is extending what they call a generous community offer. They will purchase the entire block, not through eviction, but through direct buyouts well above market value. Every family displaced will also receive a significant relocation stipend to assist with their transition. A Vancroft spokesperson said, "We have listened to the community's concerns. We don't want to destroy a home for the arts. We want to build a better one." It was a masterstroke. A move of devastating genius. He hadn't fought back with threats. He hadn't sent more thugs. He had used the tactic that destroyed his mother. He was killing us with kindness. He was making us an offer we couldn't refuse, an offer that would make us look like fools if we did. The screen showed pictures of smiling children and quotes from Donald about his commitment to the city. He had taken my words, my passion, and twisted them into a public relations weapon. He wasn't the villain anymore. He was the savior. "No," Collins whispered, his voice full of disbelief. "No, it's a trick. It has to be a trick." We raced back to the center. The moment we walked in, I knew we had already lost. The room was buzzing, but not with the energy of a fight. It was the frantic, hopeful chatter of people who had just been handed a winning lottery ticket. Leo was showing his mother the news story on his phone. Maya's father was talking excitedly with another man. A new building, a stipend. Did you hear how much? They saw Donald's offer as a lifeline. A clean, safe building. Money in their pockets. A way out of a fight they were terrified of losing. To them, it wasn't a cage. It was a castle. Collins stood on the makeshift stage, trying to get their attention. "Listen to me, everyone. Please. You can't fall for this," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Don't you see what he's doing? He's buying you. He's buying your silence." A woman I recognized, Maria, whose son loved the pottery wheel, stepped forward. Her face was hard. "Buying us? He's offering our children a future. A safe place, not this." She gestured around the room, at the patched walls and the faint outline of the graffiti that Leo could never quite scrub away. "It's easy for you to stand up there and tell us to fight, Collins. This isn't your home. Your children aren't being scared in the middle of the night." Another man chimed in, his voice angry. "And what about her?" He pointed a trembling finger at me. "This Sarah. She comes here from God knows where, gets us all on television, makes us a target, and now you want us to turn down the best offer we'll ever get? Maybe she likes the fight. We just want to live." The words hit me like stones. My own sanctuary had turned against me. I was the outsider, the agitator. I was the liability Donald had warned me about. I had tried to give them a voice, and in doing so, I had led them straight into his trap. I was trapped too. I knew his promises were empty. I knew the new facility would be tangled in red tape until everyone forgot about it. I knew the money would come with strings that would pull them apart. I knew it because I knew the man who was making the offer. But I couldn't tell them that. I couldn't say, "Don't trust him, he's my husband, and this is how he breaks things." The argument raged on, splitting the room in two. Families who had stood side by side were now shouting at each other. The heart of the community was breaking right in front of me. Finally, Leo's mother held up her hands. "Enough," she cried, her voice silencing the room. "We are not enemies. We are neighbors. We will decide this together. We will take a vote. In 2 days. We will vote on whether to accept the Vancroft offer." The words sealed our fate. The fight was no longer ours against him. It was now them against us. People filed out of the center, not in a unified group, but in small, fractured clumps, whispering and avoiding eye contact. Soon, only Collins and I were left, standing in the middle of the empty, silent room. The air was thick with defeat. Collins sank onto the edge of the stage, burying his face in his hands. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, the fire in him reduced to embers. "They're going to take it," he said, his voice muffled. "They're going to take the deal, and everything we fought for will be gone." He looked up at me, his eyes full of a desperate, pleading hope. It was the last thing he had left. "You have to talk to them, Sarah," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're angry and scared, but they listen to you. They believe in you. You're the only one who can make them see the truth." He reached for my hand, his grip tight, searching for the strength he thought I had. The weight of his trust was unbearable. He was asking me to save them, but he had no idea that I was the source of their ruin. I stood there, frozen, the echo of Donald's voice in my ear. This is your last chance to choose the cage. He had built one for all of us now. And I was the one holding the key. My confession was the only thing that could set them free, but it would lock me away forever. The silence in the room was deafening, filled only by the sound of my own heart breaking. My hand felt small in his. His thumb traced circles over my knuckles, a simple, grounding touch in the middle of the wreckage of our hopes. My whole body was a tightly wound spring of panic, but where our skin met, I felt a strange calm. He wasn't giving up, so I couldn't either. I had to be the Sarah he believed in, just for a little while longer. Don't listen to them, he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. They're scared. When people are scared, they look for someone to blame. He finally looked at me, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole the air from my lungs. This is not your fault, Sarah. You are the best thing that ever happened to this place. To me. The confession hung between us, more fragile and beautiful than any work of art in the room. He didn't just see me as a fighter. He saw me as something more. Something for him. My heart ached with a terrible mix of joy and shame. I was a fraud, accepting the trust of the most honest person I had ever met. Collins, I started, the truth a poison on the tip of my tongue. I had to tell him. I had to tell him everything before he found out some other way. Shh, he whispered, moving closer. He gently cupped my face, his hands callous from work, but his touch softer than anything I had ever known. You don't have to say anything. We don't have to solve it all tonight. His gaze dropped to my lips, and the whole world seemed to shrink to the few inches between us. We just need to remember what we're fighting for. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. But I couldn't. I was a starving woman being offered a feast. I met him halfway, my eyes closing as our lips touched. The kiss was not frantic or desperate. It was a promise. It was full of the story of his grandfather's bookstore, of Maya's dragon, of every secret dream whispered in this dusty, beautiful room. It tasted like hope. In that moment, I wasn't Seraphina Vancroft. I wasn't a liar. I was just Sarah, a woman being kissed by a man who saw her soul, and for one perfect, stupid second, I let myself believe it was real. I tangled my fingers in his fiery hair, pulling him closer, trying to absorb his strength, his goodness. It felt like coming home. Like breathing after being underwater for years. He pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against mine. He was smiling. See, he murmured. That's what we're fighting for. Something real. A sharp, clicking sound from the doorway made us spring apart. Evelyn Reed stood there, her phone held up, a small smile playing on her lips. She hadn't been taking a picture. She had been recording. My blood turned to ice. Now that is a story, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. She lowered her phone. The brave leaders of the resistance, finding a moment of passion amidst the struggle. It's perfect. Collins stepped in front of me, his body shielding mine. What the hell do you think you're doing, Evelyn? Delete that. Now. Relax, playwright, she said, waving a dismissive hand. I'm not going to use it. Not like that, anyway. It's just insurance. Her sharp eyes landed on me, and her friendly mask was gone. In its place was a cold, hard ambition. You see, your little interview was very popular. A lot of people are asking the same question. Who is Sarah? So I did some more digging. It's my job, after all. I couldn't move. I felt like a butterfly pinned to a board. This was it. She was going to say my name. Collins would know. I went through old property records. City archives. It's amazing what you can find when you look hard enough, Evelyn continued, walking slowly into the center of the room. She ran a finger over a dusty table. I was looking for Vancroft's name. For some dirty secret. But I found another name instead. A name connected to this very building. A deed filed years ago. Collins frowned. What are you talking about? This building is owned by some holding company. It is now, Evelyn said, her eyes locking onto mine. But before that, it belonged to a family. Immigrants who bought it for a song when this neighborhood was nothing. They ran a small import-export business out of here. Until they hit hard times. She paused, letting the silence stretch. The name on that original deed, was de la Cruz. My breath hitched. The floor seemed to fall away beneath my feet. It was a secret I had buried so deep I had almost convinced myself it wasn't real. This building, this place I had poured my secret heart into, hadn't been a random choice. It had been my father's first business in America. His first failure. The place where his dreams had died. Donald had never known. I had found it by accident, a ghost from a past I never spoke of, and I had tried to bring it back to life without ever admitting why. Collins looked from Evelyn to me, a dawning horror on his face. He was smart. He was a storyteller. He was connecting the dots. De la Cruz, he repeated, the name sounding foreign and strange in his Irish accent. He took a step back from me, the space between us suddenly a gaping canyon. No, it's not possible. Evelyn gave a cruel little laugh. Oh, it's more than possible. It's the story of a lifetime. The enigmatic wife of Donald Vancroft, Seraphina de la Cruz, secretly fighting her own husband to save her family's old property. How could I have been so blind? You don't just look like her. You are her. Every word was a nail in my coffin. Collins stared at me, his face pale, his freckles standing out like tiny splatters of blood. The warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by a glacial wall of shock and betrayal. He looked at me as if I were a complete stranger, a monster wearing the face of the woman he had just kissed. Sarah, he whispered, his voice broken. It wasn't a question. It was a plea. He was begging me to deny it, to tell him this was all some sick lie. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The truth was a physical weight in my chest, crushing my lungs. My silence was my confession. His face crumpled. It was the most painful thing I had ever seen. It was worse than the vandalism, worse than Donald's threats. It was the sound of a heart breaking. All this time, he breathed, shaking his head in disbelief. All this time, you've been her. He said the word her like it was a disease. Collins, please, I finally managed, taking a step towards him. Let me explain. Explain? He flinched back as if my touch would burn him. His voice rose, filled with a pain so raw it was terrifying. Explain what? That your whole life is a lie? That our fight was just some marital drama for you? A little game to play when you got bored of your big, empty house? No, it was never a game. I cried, tears finally breaking free and streaming down my face. This place is real to me. These people are real to me. Is anything about you real? He shot back, his voice cracking. I told you about my granda. I poured out my heart to you about watching a rich monster tear down my family's history. And you're married to one. You go home and sleep in his bed. Was that funny to you? Did you two have a good laugh about the poor, passionate Irish boy who didn't have a clue? Never. I sobbed. I would never. Collins, I care about you. You care about me? He let out a harsh, broken laugh. You don't even know what that means. You live in a world so far from this one you can't even see it. You come down here and play the part of a hero, but it's a costume. You can take it off whenever you want. We can't. This is our life. The one your husband is trying to destroy. He looked around the room, at the children's art, at the makeshift stage, and his expression hardened into something cold and dead. You didn't come here to save this place. You came here to save a piece of your own property. You used us. You used our hope and our fear as your own private army. He was wrong, but he was also right. The motives were so tangled up inside me I couldn't even separate them anymore. I had wanted to save the last piece of my father's pride, but I had grown to love the people, the community, more than the bricks and mortar. But how could I explain that now? Any word I said would sound like another lie from the billionaire's wife. Evelyn watched the entire exchange with fascinated detachment, her journalist's brain taking it all in. This is better than I could have imagined, she murmured, almost to herself. Collins turned his deadened eyes on her. I hope you're happy. You got your story. Then he looked back at me, and his final words shattered what was left of my heart. I wish I'd never met you, Seraphina. He didn't storm out. He just walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He didn't look back. The door closed quietly behind him, leaving me in a silence that was louder than all the shouting. I had lost him. I had lost everything. I sank to my knees on the paint-splattered floor, the fight completely gone from me. Evelyn walked over, not to offer comfort, but to deliver the final blow. "The vote is in 2 days," she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. "Without Collins, and with everyone knowing who you really are, they will take your husband's deal. You've lost. But your story will sell a lot of papers." She left, leaving me alone in my father's building, in the ruins of my secret life. The place that had been my sanctuary was now my tomb. Donald had been right. He had warned me what would happen if I stepped out of the cage. He didn't have to destroy me. He just had to let the world see who I really was. And the person I had wanted to be more than anything, the man who had made me believe I could be her, now wished we had never met. I was completely, utterly alone. I don't know how long I stayed on the floor. Time had stopped. The bright, happy colors of the room mocked me. The smell of paint felt like poison. Each child's drawing on the wall was an accusation. I had come here to rebuild my father's ghost, and in the end, I had haunted the lives of everyone inside it. My tears had dried, leaving my cheeks tight and salty. There was nothing left inside me to cry. My body was just an empty shell, a porcelain doll that had been dropped and shattered, and now all the pieces were lying on the floor. I wasn't Sarah. I wasn't Seraphina. I was the space between two lies. Getting up was the hardest thing I'd ever done. My knees cracked, my muscles ached as if I'd been in a fight. I had been. A war with myself, and I had lost spectacularly. I walked through the empty center, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Collins's last words echoed louder. "I wish I'd never met you, Seraphina." He had said my real name, but it had sounded like a curse. I turned off the lights, plunging the room into a darkness that felt like a comfort. It matched the darkness inside me. The ride home was a blur of lights streaking past a window I didn't see. When I let myself in through the service entrance, the silence of my real home was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a tomb. I knew he would be waiting. He was in the grand living room, the one we never used. He wasn't looking out at the city. He was looking at a single painting on the wall. It was a dark, stormy seascape he had bought years ago. I always hated it. It looked like a man drowning. He didn't turn when I entered. "So," he said to the painting, "you met the press." His voice was hollow, stripped of its usual power. It was the same tired voice from the phone call. I stood in the middle of the vast room, feeling small and exposed in my simple jeans and t-shirt. My costume of a normal person. "Donald," I started, but I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry? You were right?" It all felt useless. He finally turned to face me. There were no lines of anger on his face, only a deep, profound weariness. He looked older than he had that morning. He looked like his own father. "I watched it," he said. "The interview. You were very good. Passionate. Convincing." He paused, his pale eyes searching my face. "You sounded just like her. My mother." The words were not an accusation. They were a eulogy. He was mourning a woman I had never met, and mourning the woman in front of him who was following her path to ruin. "I tried to warn you," he continued, his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it. "I told you what this world does. I didn't send those men to the center to hurt anyone, Seraphina. I sent them to scare you. To scare you back into the cage where I could keep you safe." He gestured around the perfect, lifeless room. "It may be a cage, but the monsters can't get in." "You became the monster, Donald," I whispered, the words raw in my throat. A flicker of something, pain, maybe, crossed his face. "Yes," he admitted. "Perhaps I did. It's the only way to keep the other ones at bay. I built you a fortress of money and influence. I gave you a name that deflects everything. And you went out and painted a target on your back anyway." He walked over to the bar and poured himself a drink, his hand steady. "My offer to the community, it wasn't to punish you. It was to save you. It was the only move I had left. I couldn't let you become the leader of a losing fight. I couldn't watch you be torn apart by the wolves I know are out there. So I ended the fight. I made myself the hero so you wouldn't have to die as the martyr." I stared at him, my mind reeling. This whole time, I had seen it as a war between us. Vancroft Enterprises versus Sarah's Center. But for him, it was something else entirely. He had been fighting the ghost of his mother's failure. He was so terrified of history repeating itself that he had become the very thing that destroyed her. A man who used money and power to break a spirit he claimed to love. So what now? I asked, my voice empty. Now, it's over, he said simply. He took a sip of his drink. The community will vote. They will take my offer. Your little arts center will be a memory. Your friend, the playwright, will hate you forever. That journalist will write her story, but I've already controlled the narrative. It will be a footnote. And you, he said, his eyes meeting mine, will come back here. You will be Seraphina Vancroft. You will wear the dresses and go to the galas. And you will be safe. And we will never, ever speak of this again. It was a life sentence. He was offering me my old cage back, the door now locked and barred. There was no escape. I had tried to find a life outside, and I had only succeeded in proving to him, and to myself, that there wasn't one. The despair was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders, forcing me to my knees. I had nothing left to fight with. I just nodded, a slow, jerky movement of surrender. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I was a ghost in my own home. I drifted from one beautiful room to another, seeing nothing. I put on one of the silk dresses he liked, but it felt like I was wearing a shroud. The city outside, once a place of freedom and secrets, was now just a view. A world I could see but never touch. I thought of Collins. I pictured his face when he learned the truth, the way the light in his eyes had just gone out. That image played over and over in my mind, a special kind of torture. He thought I had used him. He thought I had laughed at him. He thought my heart was as cold and empty as my husband's bank account. That was the one thing I couldn't bear. I could lose the center. I could lose my freedom. I could even lose him. But I couldn't let him live the rest of his life believing that Sarah, the woman he had opened his heart to, had been a complete lie. Because she hadn't been. She was the only real part of me. A desperate, impossible idea began to form in the ruins of my mind. It was a foolish plan, one born from having nothing left to lose. I couldn't win the vote. I couldn't fix what was broken. But maybe, just maybe, I could give him back the one thing I had stolen from him, his faith. I went to my husband's study. It was a place I never entered, but I knew he kept everything there. I found what I was looking for in a locked file drawer I had seen him use once before. The key was in a small dish on his desk. It was careless of him, but he had no reason to believe I would ever defy him again. Inside the drawer were documents. Deeds, bank statements, a history of assets. My hands trembled as I found the file with my name on it. It contained the details of the trust he had set up for me when we married. My personal allowance, the accounts I could access. And tucked within it was another, smaller folder. It held the original paperwork for the secret account I had set up myself, the one I used to fund the center. I had been so careful, but he was Donald Vancroft. Of course he knew about it. He had known all along and had let me have my little secret, my little game. The account held everything I had managed to save over the years, every bit of my allowance I hadn't spent on the clothes and jewels he bought for me. It wasn't a fortune by his standards, but to me, it was everything. It was my independence. It was my escape fund. It was the last piece of myself that was truly mine. I took the bank book and a single, folded document from the file, the original deed to the De La Cruz building, the one Evelyn had found. The proof that my roots were in that broken-down place long before my husband's name was on a skyscraper. I found Leo's number in my secret phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type the message. Asterisk, I need to see Collins. It's an emergency. Please, Leo. Tell him to meet me at the center. One last time, asterisk. An hour later, a reply came back. One word. No. Tears pricked my eyes. Of course. Why would he ever want to see me again? I typed another message, my fingers flying across the screen. Asterisk, please, Leo. Tell him I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking to give him the weapons he needs to keep fighting. Tell him I'm giving him the truth. Asterisk. I waited. Each second felt like an hour. Finally, my phone buzzed again. Asterisk, he'll be there. But I'm coming too. You're not getting him alone. Asterisk. When I walked into the center, it was dark except for a single bare bulb hanging over the stage. Collins was standing under it, his back to me. Leo stood by the door, his arms crossed, his young face set in a stony expression of distrust. He looked at me like I was the enemy. I was. Collins didn't turn around. "What do you want, Seraphina?" he asked, his voice flat and dead. "I came to give you this," I said, my voice shaking. I walked forward and placed the old, folded deed and the bank book on the edge of the stage, a few feet from where he stood. He glanced down at them without interest. "What is it? More of your husband's money? Trying to buy my forgiveness now?" "No," I said softly. "It's my money. Everything I have, that's mine. And that is proof. Proof that my family's name was on this building before yours was ever whispered in this city. Proof that my fight started long before I ever met you." He finally turned, and his face was a stranger's. The fire was gone, the passion, the laughter. He was hollowed out. "And what am I supposed to do with this?" he asked, gesturing to the items with a wave of his hand. "The vote is tomorrow," I said, my heart pounding. "You've already lost. They're going to take the deal. But the fight isn't over. It just has to change. The money is enough to start again. To rent a new space, to buy supplies. To build a new center, a better one. One that doesn't have the shadow of Vancroft or de la Cruz hanging over it. One that is truly yours. Yours and the community's." He stared at me, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why? Why would you do this? What's the game now?" "There's no game," I whispered, the final, painful truth welling up inside me. Sarah was real, Collins. My feelings for this place, for these kids, for you, they were real. Seraphina de la Cruz is the lie. She's the costume. I hate her more than you ever could. I took a shaky breath. "I can't ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I can't let you believe that what we had, what we fought for, was a lie. It was the realest thing in my life. And I'm giving it all to you now because you were right. You're the heart of this place. It was always you." He looked from my face to the bank book on the stage, then back again. I could see the war behind his eyes. The anger fighting with a flicker of confusion of something else. He didn't want to believe me. It was easier to hate me. "Take it," I pleaded. "Please. Don't do it for me. Do it for Maya. For all of them. Don't let my husband's empty promises be the end of the story. You're the storyteller. So write a better ending." He was silent for a long time. The only sound was the buzz of the single light bulb. He slowly bent down and picked up the deed and the bank book. He didn't look at them. He just held them in his hand, his knuckles white. "This doesn't change anything between us," he said, his voice hard as stone. "I know," I whispered, and my heart finally broke for good. He walked past me without another word, without another glance. He stopped in front of Leo. "Let's go," he said, his voice empty. Leo gave me one last look, a mixture of anger and pity, and then followed Collins out the door. It closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like the end of the world. I was alone under the single light, in the building that held all my ghosts. I had given away my past and my future. I had nothing left. The cage was waiting for me, and this time, I knew I would never try to leave again. There was nowhere left to go. I walked home. Not to the quiet shame of the service entrance, but through the front door of the building, under the grand canopy where Donald's black cars always waited. The doorman's eyes widened in surprise as he saw me in my worn jeans and simple t-shirt, my face streaked with dried tears. He held the heavy glass door open for me, his expression a mixture of confusion and pity. I didn't care. I was done hiding in the shadows of my own life. The elevator ride up was a slow, silent ascent into my prison. I felt the pressure change in my ears, a final, popping finality. I was returning to the cage. Donald was still in the living room, exactly where I had left him, the half-empty glass still in his hand. He looked up as I entered, his face unreadable. He took in my appearance, the same clothes I'd worn when I left, and a flicker of something satisfaction, maybe, passed through his pale eyes. He thought he had won. He thought his broken, lost bird had finally come home to roost. "It's done, then," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I walked over to the massive wall of glass that overlooked the city. The lights twinkled below, a million little lives burning brightly, each one with its own story, its own hopes. I had tried to be one of them. I had tried to burn, too. Now, all I felt was the cold glass against my forehead. "Tomorrow, you will call your mother in Manila," he said, his voice the calm, even tone of a man dictating a business memo. "You will tell her you are taking a break from your charity work. You will transfer the remainder of your personal account back into the main household fund. My assistant will book you a spa weekend. When you return, this episode will be behind us." He was erasing Sarah. He was methodically deleting every trace of her, every piece of the life I had tried to build. He wasn't just closing the cage door, he was wallpapering over the windows so I couldn't even see out. His plan was perfect, clean, and absolute. It was a death sentence delivered on a silver platter. I thought of his mother, the woman whose spirit he had watched break. He hadn't just watched. He had taken notes. He had learned how to do it himself, convinced that breaking someone was a kindness, a way of protecting them from being broken by someone else. What if I won't? I whispered to the glass, to my own faint reflection. His silence was heavy. I could feel his gaze on my back. "There is no what if, Seraphina," he said, his voice losing its calm, an edge of cold steel creeping in. "You made your choice when you came back here tonight. There is nothing for you out there anymore. I have seen to that. This is your world now. It is the only one you have." He was right. I had no money. I had no friends. The one man who had seen my soul now looked at me with disgust. I had nothing. I turned from the window and walked past him, heading toward the bedroom, toward the silk dresses and the diamond chains. I was a ghost, and it was time to get back in my coffin. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, in the acres of empty space in our bed, and waited for the sun to rise. When it did, my phone, the secret one, buzzed on the nightstand. I had forgotten to leave it behind. A message from Leo. It was just a link. My hands trembled as I opened it. The headline was explosive. "Billionaire's wife played poverty kingpin in secret real estate war." It was Evelyn's article. It was a masterpiece of cruelty. She used everything. My real name, my connection to Donald, the history of my father's failed business. She twisted my attempts to help the center into a selfish plot to reclaim family property. She painted me as a bored, manipulative puppeteer, using the poor as pawns in a twisted game against my powerful husband. And then, at the bottom of the article, was the final, devastating blow. A grainy still, captured from her video. Me and Collins, our faces close, our eyes closed, lost in the kiss that had felt like a new beginning. The caption read, *, the community leader, Sarah, in a private moment with her top lieutenant, Irish playwright Collins O'Connell. Did a secret affair fuel the fires of their resistance? *. I felt the air leave my body in a rush, a silent scream. This was it. The public ruin. The whispers that Donald said had destroyed his mother. Evelyn had made me into a monster. A rich, bored, cheating wife. She hadn't just exposed me, she had executed me, leaving my character to bleed out on the internet for the entire world to see. A strange thing happened then, in the suffocating silence of that room. The fear I had been living with for years, the terror of being found out, simply vanished. Because it had happened. The worst thing I could imagine was no longer a shadow in a dark corner. It was right here, in bright, sharp pixels on a tiny screen. And I was still breathing. Donald had told me the cage would protect me from the monsters. But the monster was a headline. It was a lie printed in a newspaper. It was a story told by someone else. And the cage wouldn't protect me from it. It would only trap me with it, forcing me to live with the shame forever. The impossible choice wasn't about the center anymore. It wasn't about Collins or Donald. It was about who was going to write the last page of my story. Evelyn? Donald? Or me? A clarity I had never known washed over me. My fear was gone, and in its place was a quiet, cold courage born from having absolutely nothing left to lose. I got out of bed. I didn't put on a silk dress. I put on my armor. My worn jeans, a plain t-shirt, and my paint-splattered sneakers. The community meeting room was packed, the air thick with tension and whispered arguments. When I walked in, a hush fell over the crowd. People stared, their faces a mixture of anger, pity, and disgust. They had all seen the article. I was a leper, a disease that had infected their community. Evelyn was in a corner, notebook open, a hungry, triumphant look on her face. Leo stood near the front, his arms crossed, refusing to meet my eyes. And then I saw him. Collins. He was standing by himself against the far wall, as far away from everyone else as he could get. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. His shoulders were slumped, the fire in him completely extinguished. He looked up and saw me, and his face hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated pain. He believed it. He believed the story Evelyn had written. A man I didn't know was standing on the makeshift stage, preparing to call the vote. I didn't hesitate. I walked through the silent, parting crowd, my sneakers silent on the concrete floor. I walked right up to the stage and stood in the center, blinking in the harsh light of the single bulb. My name, I said, my voice shaking but carrying through the silent room, is Seraphina de la Cruz. I saw Collins flinch at the name. I am Donald Vancroft's wife, I continued, each word a stone I was pulling from my own chest. And everything you read about me today, it is both a lie and the truth. I looked out at their faces, at the people I had come to care for, the people I had so terribly wronged. It's true that this building belonged to my father. He came to this country with nothing but dreams, and he poured them all into these walls. And he failed. He lost everything. Our family was broken by debt and by shame. So yes, my fight for this place started from a selfish place. I wanted to save the ghost of my father's dream. I paused, my eyes finding Collins across the room. I was speaking to all of them, but I was talking only to him. But then I came here. And I met you. I met your children. I saw the art you made. I heard your stories. And it stopped being about my father's ghost. It started being about your future. The person you knew as Sarah, she wasn't a lie. She was the most real part of me. She was the person I was before the money, before the shame, before I was forced to trade my own name for a safe, beautiful cage. I took a deep breath, the confession spilling out of me. My husband is not the monster you think he is. He is a man haunted by his own ghosts. He watched his own mother be destroyed in a fight just like this one. Everything he has done, the threats, the offer, the cage he built for me, he did it because he thinks that controlling things is the only way to protect them. He thinks love is ownership. He is wrong. He is broken. But his offer to you, it comes from that broken place. It's an illusion of safety. It is a bribe to make you forget who you are. It's the same deal I accepted years ago, and I am telling you now, the price is your soul. I could see the conflict on their faces. They wanted to hate me, but my words were chipping away at their anger. I cannot ask you to vote against his offer, I said, my voice growing stronger. You have families to feed. You deserve safety. You deserve a beautiful home. So I am not asking you to fight. I am asking you to be smart. I looked directly at Collins now, pouring all of my final, desperate hope into his eyes. I gave Collins O'Connell the deed to this building. It is legally his now. I also gave him every last cent of my own money. It is not my husband's money. It is mine. And it is now yours. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Collins's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. He hadn't told them. Take your husband's money, I said, my voice ringing through the room. Take the buyouts. Take the stipends. You have earned them. Let him pay for his sins. But do not let him buy your silence. Do not let him own your future. Use that money to start new lives, and use my money to build a new home for your art. A new center, one that is yours from the ground up, with no ghosts and no secrets. A place built on hope, not on the ruins of someone else's dream. I had given them a third choice. A way out that wasn't surrender. I had armed them. The person you knew as Sarah is gone, I said, my voice finally breaking. But the fight she believed in doesn't have to be. I stepped down from the stage. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Collins stared at me, and for the first time, the wall of ice in his eyes began to crack. He was seeing me. All of me. The liar and the truth-teller, the wife and the warrior, all at once. Evelyn was staring, her pen frozen over her notebook, her jaw slack. This was not the ending she had written. I didn't wait for the vote. My part was done. I turned my back on the stage, on the community, on the ghost of my father. I looked at Collins one last time, a silent goodbye, an apology, a final plea. Then I walked through the crowd, out the bright yellow door, and into the afternoon sun. I didn't look back. I had no home to go to. I had no money. I had no name that wasn't tainted. I had absolutely nothing. And I had never, in my entire life, felt so free. The city noise didn't register. The horns, the sirens, the endless river of people, it was all a distant hum, the sound of a world I was no longer a part of. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, my paint-splattered sneakers a silent protest on the clean pavement. Each step took me further from the center, further from the penthouse, further into an empty, unknown space. I didn't know where I was going. For the first time in my life, there was no destination, no role to play when I arrived. The freedom was so vast it felt like falling. My skin tingled with the cold thrill of it, the terror and the joy so tangled up they were the same feeling. I was a ghost who had decided to haunt herself, and the whole city was my empty house. A voice called my name. Not Sarah, not Mrs. Vancroft. Seraphina. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I closed my eyes, bracing myself. It was Collins. His footsteps grew closer, hurried and uneven on the sidewalk. He stopped a few feet behind me. I could feel his presence like a heat against my back. The silence stretched between us, thick with the wreckage of what we had been. "What you did in there," he said, his voice rough, broken. "Giving away everything. The building. The money. Why?" I turned to face him then. The setting sun caught the red in his hair, making it look like a crown of fire. His face was a battlefield of warring emotions, anger, confusion, and something else, something I couldn't name, something that made my heart ache. "Because it was the only part of the truth I had left to give," I said simply. "I owed you all that much." "You didn't owe me anything," he shot back, but the old fire was gone. His anger was a shield, and I could see the cracks in it. "You're the wife of a billionaire. You could have just disappeared. Let your husband clean up the mess. Why come back? Why face them? Why face me?" "Because I couldn't let you think she was a lie," I whispered, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. "Sarah wasn't a lie. She was the one true thing. And I couldn't let you hate her. You can hate Seraphina. God knows I do. But not her." He stared at me, his gaze intense, searching. He was a storyteller, and he was trying to read the story written on my face, to find the real plot beneath all the twists. He saw the sleepless nights, the terror, the stupid, stubborn hope. He saw the truth. "Her article, the picture," he started, his voice cracking on the last word. "It made you look like—" "I know what it made me look like," I interrupted gently. "A monster. Maybe I am. But that kiss wasn't part of the lie, Collins. It was the one moment I forgot I was lying." He took a step closer, the space between us shrinking. He looked like he wanted to say something, to reach out, but he was stopped by the sound of a long, black car pulling up to the curb beside us. The window slid down with a silent hum. Donald sat in the back, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. His pale eyes were fixed on me, but he saw Collins standing beside me, and his expression tightened into something sharp and dangerous. "Get in the car, Seraphina," he said. His voice was quiet, but it was not a request. It was the final command from a king whose kingdom was collapsing. I didn't move. I just looked at him, at this man who had owned my life for so long. The fear was gone. I had walked out of the fire, and there was nothing left of me to burn. "No," I said. The word was small, but it felt as solid as a mountain. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Don't be a fool. You have nothing. No money, no home. That rabble you tried to save will forget you by tomorrow." He, Donald said, his eyes flicking to Collins with dismissive contempt, "cannot protect you from the world. I can. I am your only safety. Get in the car." "You were never my safety, Donald," I said, and the truth of it settled in my bones, strong and clear. "You were my warden. And your love isn't a shield. It's a cage. I'd rather face the world with nothing than spend another second living in your fear." His face, for the first time since I had known him, broke. The mask of control cracked, and beneath it was a raw, desperate panic. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what they'll do to you. The press, the whispers, they will tear you to pieces, just like they did to her. Then let them, I said. My story won't end the same way as your mother's. Because I am not her. And you are not my father. Suddenly, we weren't alone on the sidewalk anymore. A group of people was approaching, their footsteps a rising tide of sound. It was Leo and Maya's parents and Maria from the pottery class and a dozen other faces from the center. They stopped a few yards away, a silent army at our backs. Leo stepped forward, his young face serious and proud. The vote is over, Mrs. Vancroft, he said, using my name with a newfound respect. We voted. We're taking his money. He nodded towards the black car. Every last dollar. And we're taking yours too. We're going to build our own place. No strings. No ghosts. He looked at me, and his eyes were clear, the anger gone, replaced with a profound, quiet understanding. You set us free. So we came to make sure you were too. Collins moved to stand beside me, our shoulders barely touching. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a statement. He was with me. The community was with me. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. I had just been too afraid to see it. Donald stared at the crowd, at their determined faces. He looked at me, standing tall and unbowed. He looked at Collins, the fiery playwright, the symbol of everything he could not control, standing guard over the one thing he had tried to possess. This was his defeat. It wasn't in a boardroom or a stock market crash. It was here, on a cracked city sidewalk, where a group of people the world called nothing had taken his power, his money, and his narrative, and had peacefully, powerfully refused him. He had lost. His perfect, controlled world had shattered against something as simple and as strong as a community's heart. He sank back into the leather seat, the fight draining out of him, leaving him looking small and tired. He looked like a ghost himself. He stared at me for a long moment, a strange, sad light in his eyes. You know, he said, his voice a hollow echo of what it once was, I saw one of your paintings years ago. Before we were even introduced. It was at a small gallery, a student exhibition. It was a painting of that old building. It was so full of fire. It was wild and alive. It was the most beautiful, dangerous thing I had ever seen. The confession hung in the air, a final, shocking revelation that rearranged the entire world. It was the same fire my mother had, he continued, his voice barely a whisper. The fire that got her killed. I saw it in you, and I knew I had to have you. I had to protect you from it. From yourself. I found out who you were. I bought the company that held your family's debt. I arranged our first meeting. The demolition. It wasn't just a project, Seraphina. It was the final step. I was trying to tear down the last piece of the girl who painted with fire, so she would finally be safe in my world. So I wouldn't have to watch her burn like my mother did. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a marriage. It had been an acquisition from the very beginning. A long, calculated project to tame something wild that he both loved and feared. He hadn't been trying to build me a cage because he met me. He had met me so he could build me a cage. It was the most monstrous and the most pathetic thing I had ever heard. He wasn't a villain. He was just a terrified boy, so traumatized by his father's ghosts that he had become him, all in a twisted attempt to stop the story from ending the same way. You can't protect fire by smothering it, Donald, I said, my voice soft with a pity that surprised me. You just kill the light. He didn't answer. He just gave the smallest nod to his driver. The window slid up, erasing his face from view. The black car pulled away from the curb, merging silently into the flow of traffic, a ghost ship sailing away into a sea of city lights. He was gone. The air felt different. Lighter. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the first truly free breath of my life. The community behind us began to talk, their voices low at first, then rising with excitement, with plans, with the sound of a future being born right there on the sidewalk. Collins turned to me, and the last of the ice in his eyes had melted. He wasn't looking at Sarah or Seraphina. He was just looking at me. His lips curved into a small, weary, beautiful smile. "So," he said, his Irish accent a warm, familiar melody. "I guess we have a story to write." I smiled back, a real smile, one that reached my eyes and filled all the broken places inside me. "Yes," I said. "We do." We stood there for a moment, not touching, just sharing the space between us as the sun finally dipped below the horizon. The city lights began to glow brighter, no longer the glittering cage of a life I'd left behind, but 1,000 new possibilities, 1,000 new stories waiting to be told. And for the first time, I knew mine was just beginning. The world rearranged itself around that empty patch of curb where his car had been. It was like a missing tooth in the city's smile, a space where something powerful and painful used to be. The crowd behind me wasn't a mob anymore. They were just people. Neighbors. Their murmurs of relief and victory were a soft wave washing over the sidewalk, but I felt strangely separate from it, like an island that had just survived a storm. My shore was littered with wreckage. Collins was the only other person on that island with me. The space between us was still charged with the lightning of my confession, but the thunder was gone. Maria, the woman who had pointed at me with such anger just days before, came forward. She stopped in front of me, her face tired but her eyes clear. We are sorry," she said, and other people behind her nodded. We did not understand. I shook my head, a lump forming in my throat. "There's nothing to be sorry for. I'm the one who lied." "No," Leo said, stepping up beside Maria. He looked older than he had a week ago. "You didn't lie. You just told us the hardest part of your story last." He managed a small, shy smile. "Thank you, Seraphina." Hearing my name from his lips felt different. It wasn't a brand or a curse. It was just a name. My name. Collins watched the exchange, his face unreadable. He didn't join in, didn't offer a single word of comfort. He just watched, and I understood. The community could forgive me for the lies about money and power. But his wound was different. I had lied to his heart. As the crowd began to disperse, talking excitedly about lawyers and bank accounts and new beginnings, he finally spoke, his voice low so only I could hear. "Where will you go?" he asked. It was a practical question, but it felt like the biggest question in the universe. I looked down the long, darkening street at the endless stream of headlights. "I don't know," I said, and the words didn't scare me. "I think I'll just walk for a while." He nodded, accepting this. He should have walked away then. He should have turned his back and rejoined the community he was now set to lead. But he didn't. He just stood there, a silent guardian, as I took my first step into my new, unknown life. And as I walked away, I felt his eyes on my back, not with anger, but with a deep, aching sorrow that felt like its own kind of goodbye. 6 months later, the city was the same, but my place in it had changed. I rented a small room in a neighborhood I'd never been to before, a place with laundromats on the corner and the sound of children playing in the street. I had found a job at a small frame shop, the smell of sawdust and varnish now a constant, comforting presence in my life. My hands, which had once been soft and manicured for display, were now calloused and sometimes stained with wood polish. I was nobody, and it was the most peaceful I had ever been. I kept my promise. I never went back to the old neighborhood. I watched from a distance, through news articles and the occasional update from Leo, who texted me every few weeks. Donald Vancroft had kept his word. He paid everyone generously. The old block was gone, flattened into a clean slate of dirt, waiting for a new tower to touch the sky. And a few blocks away from that, a new building was rising. It was made of warm brick and had big, wide windows to let in the sun. It was their new home. Sometimes, I would ride the bus past the construction site, my face hidden by a simple scarf. I'd watch the frame go up, see the community members Leo, Maria, Maya's father, volunteering on weekends, painting primer on the walls, their faces full of pride and ownership. They were building their own future. One afternoon, I saw Collins there. He was directing a group of volunteers, a blueprint spread across a makeshift table, his fiery hair bright against the gray of the unfinished walls. He laughed at something someone said, a full, open-throated laugh that I felt in my own chest from across the street. He looked happy. He looked whole. My heart ached with a bittersweet mix of joy for him and a quiet grief for what I had lost. He had never tried to contact me. I hadn't expected him to. I had given him a future, but I had also given him a ghost. I was the ghost in his new home. One rainy Saturday, a letter arrived at the frame shop for me. There was no return address, just my name written in a familiar, sharp script. It was from Leo. He needs you, it read. Asterisk, we all do. Please come. Tomorrow. Noon. Asterisk, my first instinct was to throw it away. My presence would only complicate things, bring back the past. But Leo's words echoed in my head. He needs you. It was a debt I still owed. The next day, I stood in front of the new center. It smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. The main room was huge and bright, sunlight pouring in through the massive windows. Children's art was already taped to one of the walls, a splash of chaotic, joyful color. The lopsided clay dragon was there, glued back together, its purple wings fierce and proud on a new shelf. In the center of the room was a long, simple wooden table, not unlike the one from my old life. But instead of being polished and empty, this one was covered in blueprints, sketches, and coffee cups. Collins was standing over it, his back to me, his shoulders slumped. He looked just as he had in the final, defeated days at the old center. He looked lost. Leo said you needed me, I said softly from the doorway. He stiffened, but didn't turn around. Leo shouldn't have done that. Why did he? I asked, taking a step into the room. It felt like walking onto a stage. He finally turned. He looked tired, older. The spark in his eyes was muted. The play, he said, his voice flat. The one I was writing. A small theater picked it up. They want to produce it. Collins, that's wonderful. I said, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time in months. No, he said, shaking his head. He ran a hand through his hair. It's not. It's wrong. The ending. I can't get it right. It's all anger and betrayal. It's ugly. It's not the story I wanted to tell. He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a raw, pleading vulnerability. The story was supposed to be about hope. We stood there in silence, the ghosts of our past filling the space between us. I thought of the first scene of my old life, Donald at a long table, tapping a map, talking about wastelands and erasing people. Here I was, at another table, with another man, looking at a map of a different kind, a map of creation. What's the story about now? I asked gently. He gestured to the blueprints. It's about a group of people who are offered a deal by a powerful man. A deal that saves them but breaks their spirit. They have to choose between a safe, easy lie or a hard, dangerous truth. He looked directly at me. In my version, they choose the lie. The hero fails. Everyone loses. I walked over to the table and looked down at the blueprints. I saw the pottery studio, the dance floor, the small stage in the corner. I saw Maya's dragon on the shelf. But that's not what happened, is it? I said, tracing the outline of the small stage with my finger. They didn't choose the lie. They didn't fail. They took his money, and they took my money, and they built this. They found a third choice. They wrote a better ending. He stared at the blueprints as if seeing them for the first time. You gave them that choice, he whispered. You wrote that ending. No, I said, looking up at him. We did. I picked up a pencil from the table. A story isn't just about the ending, Collins. It's about the truth of the characters. Was your hero a coward? Or was she just a person who was so afraid of burning that she almost let her own light go out? His gaze was locked on mine, and I saw the first flicker of the old fire return to his eyes. He saw what I was doing. I was giving him back his story. I was giving him back his hope. She was afraid, he said, his voice barely audible. But she was the bravest person I ever met. A single tear escaped his eye and traced a path through the freckles on his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He reached across the table and his hand covered mine, his fingers lacing through my own. His touch was warm and real, a current of life that traveled up my arm and settled right in my heart. It wasn't a desperate grab. It was a quiet, certain connection. That night, I saw a news alert on my phone. Corporate titan Donald Vancroft steps down. The article was short. He had sold his majority stake in the company, resigned from the board, and was leaving the country. There was a photo of him, looking tired and gray. The final line quoted an anonymous source. He said he was going to find something real to build, something that wouldn't cast such a long shadow. I felt a strange, quiet sadness for him. For the boy who had loved a woman who painted with fire, and who had spent his whole life trying to put it out. I closed the article. His story was over. And mine was finally my own. Collins walked me to the bus stop in the cool evening air. The new center glowed behind us, a beacon of light in the growing dark. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. The silence was comfortable, filled with a new understanding. I'm going to rewrite it, he said as the bus approached, its headlights cutting through the night. The play. I'm going to tell the true story. About the bravery and the sacrifice and the hope. He looked at me, his eyes clear and bright in the bus's lights. It's a love story. I'd like to see it when it's done, I said, my voice soft. I'd like you to design the set, he countered, his hand finding mine again, his grip firm. No one else in the world could do it. No one else knows what the light should look like, shining through the bars of a beautiful cage. The bus door hissed open. This was my choice. I could get on, ride back to my small, safe room and my quiet, solitary life. Or I could stay. My name is Seraphina, I said, my voice clear and strong. He smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes and lit up his whole face. I know, he said. It's a beautiful name. I let the bus pull away without me. What did this story teach you about freedom? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.